This is The Culture.
Hello and welcome back to the Cinema Wave podcast, where we talk about all the newest and greatest things happening in film and television. Today is a very special episode because we are talking about what everybody is talking about, and that is Barbenheimer, aka Barbie and Oppenheimer. We're very excited for this conversation, but before you tune into that, make sure that you follow us on all our social medias. On Instagram, we are at Cinema Wave Media, as well as at _Culture Wave Media. And be sure to check us out on TikTok at Cinema Wave Media as well. I am one of your hosts for this episode, Darian Scalamoni. I am joined by Liz Seiko.
Hey.
And also producer Zach Miller.
Howdy.
All right. Let's jump right into it.
Let's
so,
go.
What are we talking about? Let's talk about Barbie first.
Okay.
I wore pink in honor of the lovely film directed by Greta Gerwig with an all-star cast. Of course, Margot Robbie playing Barbie. One of the Barbies, I should say. Ryan Gosling playing the main Ken, but there's tons of other Kens in the film as well.
Yeah.
So first reactions, we'll start with you, Liz. Your thoughts on the film?
I would not change a single thing. I think it is a perfect movie from opening to ending. And I just can't wait to talk about this.
I'm also excited to talk about this movie. There's a lot in this film that I really, really, really loved. I don't think it hit me the same way that it hit you, but I'm excited to get into a deeper
I know.
and in-depth conversation. But before we do that, Zach, your quick thoughts before we jump into the in-depth conversation?
I did really like Barbie. It exceeded my expectations. My expectations were already pretty good with it going in, given the cast and Greta Gerwig behind it. But I think it definitely hit different marks that I didn't expect it to. So it really surprised me in that way, and I really came out of the theater enjoying it. So yeah, back to you.
All right. So let's start with the journey that this film went on.
Let's start from the beginning.
So this movie was produced by Mattel, which is the toy company that creates the Barbie dolls. Created the Barbie dolls back in, when were Barbies created? Do we know?
Let's
a little fun fact to start us off. The 60s?
50s, 60s.
So
Barbie first doll came out on March 9th, 1959.
Okay, very, very close, Zach.
And fun fact, the first Barbie was in the black and white striped outfit that the opening shot
Sequences.
Of Margot Robbie's Barbie is wearing. So
okay, awesome.
That's great. I love that.
The authenticity of that is awesome. So the film was originally was a Sony picture. Sony owned the rights to it, and the original interpretation of what Barbie was supposed to be was supposed to star actress and stand-up comedian Amy Schumer.
Yes.
Which would have been a completely different film entirely, I believe, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. But this version of the film, which we finally get in 2023, it was hyped for a very long time. And again, as you'll see in the title of this video, Barbenheimer is a big part of that because of the campaign on social media and the remarkable marketing that this film had since its inception.
Huge.
But Greta Gerwig directs, one of the only and well-deserved female directors to ever be nominated for Best Director at the Academy Awards. Her first film was Lady Bird, big indie, starring Saoirse Ronan. Then she did the Little Women remake, which I love that movie so much. And then Barbie is the third film she has done. She co-wrote it with her partner, who is another acclaimed filmmaker in his own right, Noah Baumbach. If you guys don't know, he did Marriage Story. It's probably the biggest movie he did. And Margot Robbie was cast in the role once Mattel got the rights back. Other people just in the film really quick, just to go over.
Well, I do want to add one thing to that. So not only was Margot Robbie cast, but she actually was the one who reached out to Mattel and was like, I want my production company to be on this to produce it. So she had her production company, Lucky Chap, kind of spear this into existence. And then once she was on it, I think that's when Greta, what I was reading was Greta came on as the writer. And then eventually, once the script kind of was getting a little bit more solidified, was when Greta was like, okay, I'm also going to direct this as well.
Okay.
So Margot she did this. She made this happen in the beginning.
She did.
Yeah.
I really respect and love too for her first big budget film to be something that's not in like the comic book realm, or something that's like, again, like one of those tentpole type of things like Jurassic Park, or doing something that is like, again, Barbie is an IP, right? But it's making a wholly original idea within this very meta movie.
Yeah.
Just going over the cast list really quick, some of the other Barbies and Kens that I'm sure you guys have recognized. By the way, if you guys just want to give a quick, we are going to go into spoilers at some point. We will remind you when that happens, because this is a very in-depth discussion on both Barbie and Oppenheimer, so you've been warned ahead of time. Margot Robbie, like we said, is the titular character of Barbie. The other Barbies in the film are Issa Rae, Kate McKinnon, Alexandra Shipp, Emma Mackey from Sex Education, Harry Neff, who was one of the, I think, only standouts from The Idol, which we've talked about.
Yes, literally.
Sharon Rooney, and then those were like the main Barbie. And then Dua Lipa has a very small part as a Barbie as well. In terms of the Kens, we have Ryan Gosling, who's the lead Ken, but we also have Simu Liu from Shang-Chi, Kingsley Benadir, Scott Evans, Nakuti Gatwa, who is also from Sex Education, and then a really quick Ken Merman cameo from the one and only John Cena,
which was incredible in itself and total. I didn't know that he was in it as a cameo.
Yeah, and I think that they were talking about the reason they were able to do that was because Margot and John Cena know each other from the Suicide Squad, which James Gunn directed.
Oh, okay.
He played Peacemaker. She played Harley Quinn. So that was cool that they were able to collaborate.
Come
yes,
together.
him popping out of the water as a merman was
everything.
peak cinema, I would say. So just a quick question too for you, Liz, in terms of, let's talk about the overall story of the film. What were some of the reasons why you loved this film as much as you did?
I just think that this film, okay, so like, let's talk about the story. So we're going to get into a little bit of spoilers now, because I'm going to start talking about the actual, on paper, if you were reading this script, what it would come off as versus what visually came to be. So the actual storyline is that there's this Barbie land world that it's connected to the real life world. And these Barbies that live there are kind of humanized versions of the Barbies that people in real life are playing with. And so what happens is Margot Robbie's character eventually starts malfunctioning, and she goes to kind of what they call
Weird Barbie.
Weird Barbie.
Yep, that's Kate McKinnon's character.
I can't even name a better casting than her as Weird Barbie. It was perfect. I think she leaned into it incredibly, and just gave us everything that we could want from it. I also think it's such a great homage, because, I mean, did you guys play with Barbies at all growing up, or like know anybody that like, did you have sisters that like grew up with them at all?
I did not. I had girl cousins that played with Barbies.
Okay.
I was more of a wrestling action.
So I'm gonna tell you guys that you damage your Barbies when you're younger. My sisters and I, we would cut their hair. It would be chaos. We'd draw on them to give them like nail polish. We'd draw it on their faces to give them blush and like makeup. And then we'd give them baths and like destroy them. And so with Weird Barbie, it was just such a great moment to be like, oh my gosh, yes, like that is actually what happened in childhood, like with these dolls. It wasn't just like, oh my god, I love my Barbie, I want to take care of my Barbie. It's like, no, you beat your Barbie. Like you put her through it. And so I loved that moment. But anyways, so she goes to Weird Barbie to be like, what's going on with me? I have flat feet. Like I'm not flying anymore. My toast is getting burnt. I'm drinking like sour milk. And Weird Barbie explains that the connection to the real world is something's happening with the person that is playing with her specific doll. And that in order to fix herself, she needs to go and fix kind of the human that is playing with her and see what's going on and like reform their bond and their connection. And so then it starts this incredible story of Margot going into the real world, and then Ryan Gosling's Ken following with her because he just is infatuated with her and wants to be her superhero in a way. And then it goes and follows them into the real world. And I I think another note to say is that in Barbie Land, they all are under the assumption that they kind of like saved the world by bringing.
It's very much a matriarchy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that they saved the world by bringing Barbie into the world and being like, we've shown that like women can rule and women can just run an entire country and world by themselves. So Barbie's coming expecting like the red carpet rolled out for her. People are going to be like, oh my God, Barbie, like you saved us. Like you showed us what we can do. And she shows up in a world that is very patriarchal. And she becomes very self-conscious. And it's kind of like the veil is lifted over her of being like, oh my God, I just came from a world that I was not aware of anything. And now I am hyper aware of not only the people around me, but myself now. And so that I think is an interesting point that we'll talk to more of. But then on the opposite end, it's Ken's like unveiling of seeing like a world that is run by men versus a world that he's been in, Barbie Land, that's previously been run only by women. So then that goes into a whole different storyline, which we'll also get into. And then the story keeps going into Barbie trying to find the girl. She ends up finding her. There's a big surprise that the girl ends up not necessarily being the young girl that she finds, but it ends up being her mom that is the person that played with the Barbie the most. And then they come back to Barbie Land to chaos unveiling because Ken is trying to bring patriarchy ruling to Barbie Land. And so I just think I think this movie brought much more than anybody thought it was going to bring. I think that a lot of people knew it was going to be a fun film that was going to have good laughs, but I don't think people thought that it was actually going to talk into these big topics of patriarchy versus matriarchy, and then also just life existence. And also talking about like big corporation versus like regular people and how big corporations just see people as money versus like everyday people are just trying to survive kind of. So that's why I loved it, but
a lot to digest.
I kind of just went on a rant, but
So, and then I definitely want to hear Zach's take as well. So I think that a lot of what you talked about worked for me on like a holistic level. Like I really, really appreciated and loved the care that was given to Barbie Land and just how different that felt, yet so big and so broad of a universe. That those meta-isms, for the lack of a better term, is what I really appreciated about the movie and kind of the world building that Greta was able to do. And just, again, like the supporting cast, again, Gosling and Margot Robbie are fantastic in the film.
Yeah.
But all the other Barbies and Kens being able, and the production design in particular, is able to make this feel like you're immersed in, like, again, like you're playing with Barbies. And like as someone that didn't play with Barbies, like I was like, oh, this is exactly how I could imagine a young girl feeling and imagining in her own right. Playing with those dolls, like at least when I was, again, like I talked a little bit, but like when I was a child, I used to play with wrestling action figures, and I would like line them up, and then I would imagine in my head like the moves that they would do.
Yeah.
So like I could like picture the ring, and I could picture the moves. Being immersed in that world was something I really appreciated and I really enjoyed about the movie. Even the splintering that you talked about with Barbie malfunctioning, I was like, oh, this is a fun concept. I could really get behind this. A lot of what happened in the real world and I've been saying like the fish out of water storyline didn't work for me, partly because I think that the whole corporate aspect that you were talking about is something that I understood what they were going for, but to me it was unnecessary for the movie that I wanted. So again, you have to take the movie as a whole, right? Like,
what movie did you want?
I wanted more of the meta-isms. Like, and I thought the beginning and the end of that movie, and I do think that the human element of it was important. I don't think that the fish out of water storyline should have been cut completely. I just thought that the movie started to drag in those moments more so versus the other moments.
Really? Because I
Yeah.
feel like it wasn't even that long that they were in like LA and like the real world.
Yeah, see, I felt like, again, to me, it's like that's the whole. I could separate the movie into 3 acts by like Barbie Land, and then they go to the real world, and then they go back to Barbie Land, and that's Act 3 to me. That's how it felt. Now, again, in terms of runtime, I don't have the exact minutes and how many minutes logged in the real world.
Was there a specific scene, or was it just in general the moment that they got there?
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit off camera about this,
did.
but Will Ferrell we forgot to mention Will Ferrell's in this movie.
Well, yes.
He plays the president of Mattel. And when, like, even the moment where Barbie goes to the school and she goes to talk to the little girl who she thinks it is, like, I really like that moment. And again, just being able to interact with characters that felt grounded in the real world. And there are assholes and scumbags in the real world that, again, like you talked about with the corporations and that kind of commentary, they do exist. But there's an element of Will Ferrell just being someone that is a heightened actor in general. And I feel like, again, I do understand Greta was probably like, yeah, you're Will Ferrell, improv whatever you want. But to me, it hurt the movie, and the real world aspects that worked for me were the more humanistic parts. Like when Barbie is sitting on the bench. We'll get into that scene in depth.
Yeah.
But Barbie's sitting on the bench with the older woman, and it's a very important scene. I know Zach wants to comment on it too, so we'll jump to him in a second. But those kind of moments really worked for me, and it pulled the emotion out, even as like as a man, as like a human being, seeing that and the important connection that was Barbie and that old woman sitting on the bench. That worked for me. The ridiculousness of the whole Mattel and like even the whole scene where they're chasing Barbie, to me, like, just didn't work. So all of that stuff, and it doesn't completely ruin the movie for me because, again, and this sounds like it's negative, but I promise it's not. I really, really enjoyed the movie, and I can't wait to talk about more of the positive aspects. But that took me out of the movie at a time where I was so immersed in it that I was just like, oh, no, go back to where you were. Like, it took me out of the movie.
But I completely disagree.
It's fair.
Because
you're entitled to your opinion.
Because I think that there had to be a in-between person to connect Barbie world and the real world. Because
you don't think America Ferrera's character did like, I thought she was great in the movie.
I think that she was great, but I don't think that she was the connecting part, because they talk about how a Barbie before has already come into the real world and it didn't go well. And so, like, if we're talking at it from like a real life point of view, like the fact that a CEO knows that there's a different world that holds life Barbies, like, they're not going to be a normal grounded person. Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
I do understand what you're saying, but I think that's what I don't like about the movie. I would have rather them be like, oh, this is the first time we've had to deal with, like, I don't know, like, it just didn't.
But then I think the story becomes about this big event of like a first time Barbie coming to the world, rather than focusing on the story of like, what is the purpose of Barbie?
That, again, going back to, I think that whole element of the story didn't need to be in the movie. Like, I think that she could have she could have came into the real world, had the interactions with the humans, found all that out. Like, she didn't need to find that out because of his character, in my opinion. Again, to be fair, the biggest moment that happens with the Mattel storyline is her sitting down and having a meeting with the woman who's portraying the woman who created Barbie, who is in a side room in Mattel's headquarters. She could have ran into that woman at any point during any chase sequence or anything. The whole Mattel part of it, in my opinion, just was so unnecessary and didn't need to be in the movie.
I completely disagree. So I want to know what Zach thinks.
Let's jump to Zach. I want to hear Zach's opinion.
I was gonna say, just unpacking it again when hearing you guys talk about it. I think that the Mattel sequence, I did like the Mattel sequence because I thought it was a little bit of this genetic ridiculousness that was coming from the real world into Barbie Land. And it was so, like, Will Ferrell was great. Like, one of my favorite parts was when they were trying to chase her down and he was like losing the key card and he's like, how are we gonna get out here? Like, it was just a genetic, like, everybody is so ludicrous in their exaggerated antics. And then I also think it does play to the story a bit in the sense of I think they're the bridge between the matriarchy and the patriarchy in a way, because they kind of have their own idea of what a Barbie is and what it's supposed to represent, even though it's not 100% accurate. And I think that Margot coming to them and bringing light of, or her realizing that this isn't what Barbie was, and then she's like having those second thoughts. She's like, oh, I don't know if I want to go in the box and like be put in your cage again, because they do have a way of, like if there were no, like if there was no female say in this movie, it could just be completely like, if we were to roll the clocks back again like 50 years, how this movie could have been made 50 years ago, it would have been told from a male perspective of what a Barbie would be, or what and the ideal woman would be, which is kind of what Greta is recalling. And she's like, that's the whole point of like how Ken discovers masculinity in his own way, in that ridiculous fashion as well, as like, oh yeah, it's beer, horses,
but it's so
trucks,
funny,
which is good.
It's
no,
so
yeah,
good.
yeah, and which is what I love about it too. So they have that heightened, exaggerated version of masculinity, but that was the point, is because they want to show you both extremes, I think, and they want you to land in the middle of what you define it as, which is the same thing. I think it was when the montage is happening towards the end as well. I thought that was very touching, by the way, when they have the feeling of, on film, there are little girls growing up everywhere again, and however we define this Barbie is how they're going to see themselves, and it is going to give them inspiration in their life. And I think it was a line in the movie too, it was like, Barbie's image is to give them the inspiration to grow up and be whatever they want to be. And then also showing that this is now, we're trying to reach that point of equal opportunity and getting to that perspective of like, we need to be at this place, and this is an opportunity now for young girls to make their way in the same things that men can do. And then it wraps it up at the end of like, there needs to be a balance between the two, between men and women. But so now I just went into the whole psychology of the film out of Mattel. But yeah, so I like the Mattel sequences because I think it was the like the corporate, like immediately when they get in the room, when Barbie gets in the room, she sees like 20 odd guys in suits, pink ties. They're like, oh no, we are representing the female brand. But then she's like realizing that they're slowly out of touch.
Yes.
So I think the chase sequence is up for question of like the importance. And yes, I do agree. Like, she just happened to stumble in that room with the same person. That was convenient. But I did like how it was just as ridiculous in their headquarters compared to Barbie Land, and then they go into the real world and it's more grounded.
Interesting.
But
yeah, see, like I think that. By the way, thank you for all of that, because diving into the psychology of it, I think you said it perfectly. And again, like I guess it's hard for me as someone who is watching the movie again and breaking up. It's not like I break up every movie by acts, right? But when it's that, I don't even know how to explain it. It just felt very knee-jerk to me. And I really loved and appreciated where they were going with it. And then it felt like the movie got away from me in those moments. And I that upset me because of how much I enjoyed so many of the other elements of the film. So I don't know how else to explain it other than I just think that like there were elements of the Mattel sequences that I did enjoy. Going back to what Zach said about the box, like that was something that that was a great visual representation, and I'm like really happy they showed that again, like right before, and they did it in a creative way with, again, the way that the toys are made, right? They have the twisties, like trying to kind of lock her into place, and she was like, no, something doesn't feel right. Like, I appreciated sequences like that, but there was something about the whole corporate element of it. And then I think about, again, the movie's produced by Mattel. And it's like they did poke fun, but at the same time at the expense of still also shoehorning their brand into the film, which I just didn't think was fully necessary. So which again, I think we just agree to disagree on like whether we think it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because to me, it was those sort of moments that just took me out of the film completely versus the self-awareness in what Barbie Land was. And again, even the matriarchal versus patriarchal, which we start to see the transitioning of that when they go into the real world, and Ken going into the library and picking out books off the shelves that just say horses on them.
And truck.
Yeah, and truck.
Truck.
Which is hilarious. And it's so funny and it's so stupid, but it's so great. Those kind of moments to me were like good visual gags. And again, I guess I just disagree in terms of, but again, humor is all subjective too, right? So like a lot of the sequences with Will Ferrell, I was just like, I just don't think it's that funny. And I just wish it wasn't in the movie, because I don't think it's as funny as what they were crafting within the doll characters, so to speak. So I don't know.
Okay.
See, like this is the first time I feel like, and I guess it's weird because it's not a strong disagreement. There's so much about this movie that I really love.
I think it's also like, I think that what Greta was getting at having him be such like a goofy, over the top character is Barbie walks into this corporation thinking like, yes, I'm gonna get to talk to the female CEO of Mattel that made Barbies and like made us, and she walks in and it's a full room of just men, who the CEO is like is not the most intelligent person. And so when in her mind she's like, wait, why is the CEO this guy that has like pink drumsticks and is like playing around, but yet you don't have a single female in this room?
And that's the critique on it too. It's
yes,
like we have like society has been used to men speaking for women, and I think that was the point she was trying to make. Is she's like, wait, what? This is a female product on paper. Why is this only being
well, it's like you'd
men?
rather, like, what she's saying is that the patriarchy would rather have a very over the top, like, not intelligent man as a leader versus an intelligent female.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So that, I think, is the take that she's trying to get at, because if they did have a very like aware, grounded male CEO who was like, oh, it's Barbie, we have to protect her, like we have to like take care of her, then I don't think you would have that contrast of what the Barbies are fighting for at the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
We need Logan Roy as the Barbie CEO.
Oh my goodness, could you imagine?
No.
Holy crap. Just, oh my god, I'm visualizing that. Brian Cox with a pink tie.
You're effing pirates for Barbies.
I think that in terms of, again, just the whole, like, I think that I fully understand what she was going for. I just think that even I feel like I connect more to the human element of when she gets to the real world, and she's, again, and when she has those all the monologues that America Ferrera delivers at the end of the film when they go back to Barbie Land with their daughter, are very powerful and are very real and spoke volumes to being a perfect female voice for what I mean, you can speak better on it than I can, but what females want to say, right?
Yeah.
And how it feels to be in this male-dominated society. I thought that the relationship between Margot's Barbie and America Ferrera's character and her daughter worked really well for me, and that could have been it. Like, if they went in the real world and they expanded more on that versus the corporate element, again, I still think those essential central points of like meeting the older woman on the bench, which is before she even goes to the headquarters, and again running into the creator of Barbie at a random place when it feels very convenient, as Zach said, all of those elements could still be within the film, and it could be stronger having gotten rid of the corporate element of it.
But what do you think, if they took out the corporate element, would have been the driving force to get Margot Robbie Barbie back to Barbie World? Barbie Land. What is it? Barbie World? Barbie Land?
Barbie Land.
Barbie Land.
Yeah, so I guess
what do you think?
So I'm trying to recall.
Script, like point wise, what do you think Greta could have written as the catalyst?
All right, so I'm trying to recall. Forgive me for not being able to remember exactly. Is it that she, in the real world, then gets to a point where she realizes that Ken...
No. So they're driving around and they're in that car chase because she's trying to escape from Mattel.
Yes.
And they're like, we don't know where to go. Like, they're chasing us. And she's like, oh, I know where to go. And so she's like, we just have to get on roller skates right now and go back to Barbie Land.
Okay, so and the question you just asked me is the driving force.
If they got rid of the corporate element of Mattel, what do you think would have been that driving force then to bring them back to Barbie Land?
Well, you just explained that they just go to Barbie Land just to escape.
But what would they escape if they took?
What would you replace?
What would you replace if they took out the corporate?
I just don't think you need an escape sequence. I think again, like she's going to you got to remember she's going to the real world to have this relationship, or the main driving focus in the inciting incident, I guess, right, is that she's going into the real world to fix herself because she doesn't want to feel all these things that we talked about where she feels like she's like splintering in her own Barbie land, right? So then she tries to have this relationship with this little girl. We find out that it's not her. She's actually like the one that is, it's not her Barbie.
Yeah,
it's her mother's. And that you find out later on when they're in Barbie Land that she's the one, and then they have that serious connection, right? So it's a corporate commentary that is in the movie, and it's important, and I understood exactly what its relevance was. But I just didn't think it was necessary because, again, her going back to Barbie Land at that point is to take out Ken and his Mojo Dojo Casa house.
No, it's to escape from the corporation. Because she doesn't know that Ken went back, like, with a total different mindset until she gets there.
No. I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying like that. I don't know if I would have made the central point then to escape Mattel. To me, it would have been to have this human connection with. At this point, she still thinks it's the little girl, and then she also has this human connection then with America Ferrera's character, which is another sort of climactic point. Like I don't think the film has one climax. I think it has multiple climaxes, and you kind of see it towards the end of the movie when. Even like at the end when they trick all the Kens to get Barbie Land back to a matriarchy, there's a very central important thing at the end of the film where Barbie is like, no, Ken, like you have to find yourself. And it's not about you trying to chase after me. Like you're your own person. Very much how she found herself with the group element and like working together as a like female empowerment.
Yeah.
So to me, again, I just don't know if it's necessary. Like, I guess it's necessary to what this film is. And I just don't know if I liked that part of it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
I will calm down now with this with this topic of Barbie.
Well, you were talking about the production design specifically, but do you want to also talk about the other filmmaking aspects, like especially the Easter eggs that they included into the film?
So do you want to touch upon that?
Yeah. Well, there was so we were kind of the three of us looking at some of the references that Greta Gerwig decided to add to it, and the biggest one is the opening, and it's 2001: Space Odyssey, and almost shot for shot, it is exactly Stanley Kubrick's epic from the 60s, and it was such a great comedic parody on just how the birth of Barbie changed the world, or the image of like being a woman and just playing with a doll, like literally throwing out all their old dolls, breaking them. What were the other ones we were talking about, the references?
So Greta does a lot of like other film references in her in some of the shots, and so some of them are with the Ken dancing sequence. It's a reference to Singing in the Rain and a little bit of Grease. And then in a few shots, it's a reference to Wizard of Oz, especially when Margot Robbie is driving away from Barbie Land. It kind of looks like Oz is in the background. And then also when she's driving through the field of flowers, it kind of looks like that field of flowers that they're walking through in Wizard of Oz. The Matrix, so there's a moment when Weird Barbie is saying like, do you want the high heel shoe or the Birkenstock?
It's a great scene and a great visual gag.
It's also just a very self-aware movie because she's like, do you want the high heel or the Birkenstock? And Margot Robbie's character is like, the high heel. Absolutely. Like, I want that one.
Yeah.
Rather than being like, I need to go figure out my life. Like, she's like, no, I want to go back.
She's like, no, you want.
And then she's like, no, you have to take this. Like, let's do it again. She's like, high heel?
What is the line she says? She goes, I offered you I had to give you both because I had to give you an option, but the option doesn't really exist.
Yeah,
It's like so unbelievably self-aware and,
no,
hilarious.
she's like, you have to take it.
Yeah,
Like, there's no option actually. And she's like, so we're gonna do it again. But so that's a reference to the Matrix of like the blue pill or red pill. Like, do you want to forget everything, or do you want to take this pill and then enter into a new world and like be able to start seeing things for as they really are? Which obviously her character doesn't have that option, but she goes and onto it. And then there's when they first get to like California, there's Ken and Barbie end up changing their clothes, and they're both in like these cowboy outfits, and so that's a play on like Midnight Cowboy in one of those scenes, which it's just also the costumes in this show in this film impeccable, spot on, everything that I could have dreamed of.
Exactly. I think it goes back to so much of how much care is given into the world that Greta created with this take on what Barbie is, right? The set photos emerged a really long time ago of them rollerblading in the middle of California in those like ridiculous, wacky, like 80s, like neon.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. And that whole sequence is great where they finally enter the real world. But yeah, in terms of the cinematic references, I really love how impactful and obvious it is that cinema plays such a big part into Greta Gerwig's life. And as someone that was an actor turned director, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. She's like an amazing example of someone that has such a fantastic artistic ability and mind and appreciation for movies in general, that she's able to take an idea or, again, like a visualization from previous historic and impactful movies and television and put her own spin on it to make it perfectly fit in the mold of what she created.
Yeah.
I do think, again, the 2001 Space Odyssey one is one that we've known about for a while too, because it's in the trailer.
Yeah.
The first trailer for the film.
It's so good.
And there's so much to love about this film. Like even the musical sequences, the Dance the Night Away sequence early on in the movie, I think is laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of how drives us into the inciting incident, right?
That's the moment she's like dancing.
It's a throwaway line, you think, but then it's very real because she's like,
Yeah.
anyone ever dream about dying? And then you realize that's the first time that Barbie, not everything is okay with
Yes.
Barbie as it has been.
And she starts to become a little bit more self-aware because you see Margot's acting is beautiful in this too, because she is in the early scenes, she's trying to stay in her like naive Barbie mentality, but she is like, wait a minute, why did I just say that to myself and like to everybody, and like I'm just gonna kind of ignore this, but also maybe I shouldn't. In just a second she gives you everything, so it's so good. But also the writing, Greta's writing made me laugh out loud. Honestly, I haven't really laughed this much at a movie in a while. I feel like comedies have been very stagnant lately, and I know people wouldn't say that this is a straight up comedy necessarily, but I think it's probably one of the funniest movies that's come out this year.
I would agree. And I think the fantastical elements of it also make it really funny.
Yes.
There hasn't been a lot of really great straight comedies. And I think that's where this transitioning that we're seeing sort of in Hollywood with these, like, again, like there's not a lot of these balls to the wall, throw everything out there comedy. And I think that it actually lends itself better, especially for this movie, because in Greta's writing too, there's just such an authenticity to her characters and the way that she writes them. And I think it's very interesting that she co-wrote this with Noah Baumbach, who's her longtime partner. And he's very indie, and he's very about, I mean, again, he's written and directed some of the most like hard-edged, dramatic, emotional, heartbreaking films. I mean, like Marriage Story is the obvious one. The Squid and the Whale is like a very, very, I love that movie, but it's a very serious movie about divorce. And the two of them being able to, like, I imagine them just sitting and writing this film together and laughing at how ridiculous it is, but at the same time being able to, and it's not even shoehorning, because there's a very obvious intent on having these heart-wrenching or tender moments throughout the film. I saw it with my girlfriend. She was like in tears at the end, and it was for so many reasons. But again, that element of I want to go back to the scene at the bus stop, which we touched on a little bit. she's able to, in her writing, going back to what you were saying,
Yeah.
Greta's able to show so much and tell so much by doing so little in that scene. And Margot's performance in that scene alone is remarkable. First of all, I think I agree with what you were saying. She's fantastic in this film. I can't visualize anybody else playing the part.
Yeah.
I really
Not
can't.
with this script.
No.
Which I do think, I mean, Greta wrote it with Margot in mind because they teamed up. So yeah, this script, I can't picture anybody else.
Yeah. And I think that the emotion that comes out of that scene at the bus stop, just with a single glance, and just saying that this woman is beautiful, and a moment where so many of us, I feel, want to say that to other people all the time, but we don't say it enough. And again, just bringing like the tear to her eye, like there's an emotional core to that I think only Greta is able to grasp and display the way that she does it in this film.
Yeah, and I think Greta's come out and said that they wanted to cut that scene initially, and she really fought for it because she said, like, I won't know what this film is about if that scene gets cut. And I think it's also because that's the first moment that you really start to see that change, the psychological change in Barbie, where she starts to realize, like, oh, I've been living in this bubble of just youth and beauty, and like there is beauty as life goes on, and like I won't ever change if I stay in Barbie land. I won't ever see life evolve. I'll just stay where I am and nothing will change. So I think that's then the catalyst for her kind of going on this hunt of trying to find meaning and like what is she supposed to do, and kind of the veil has been lifted from her, and does she want to cover her eyes back and go back to the mental state that she was in of just being some naive person that doesn't question, or does she want to take that leap into life and really start to just go into a world that she doesn't know but she's excited about?
Zach, did you have anything on that sequence in particular?
I was just gonna kind of add to what you guys were saying, but I can't believe that the studio would want a scene like that cut from something that is trying to be. The film is not just about the humor; it's about those important messages that Greta, of all people, is trying to get across, and it was essential to, how we see ourselves, how we see other people, and then having that come from a doll as a character. They're supposed to be the perfect image, and then Barbie is realizing that the world is not as perfect as she imagined after several things coming into the world. But yeah, it was just so important that scene among some of the other scenes, like the montage, the monologue toward the end, that was in the movie. And I don't know if we mentioned it too, but the old woman at the bus stop was the daughter of the Barbie creator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, well, if we didn't mention it already, just letting our viewers know. So that was cool that they incorporated her into the movie too, keeping a little bit of the legacy in the family. But yeah, so I thought that was a very important scene, and it definitely needed to happen.
For sure. Do we want to dive into the Kendom of it all?
Ryan Gosling made this movie so much better than I could have imagined. Like he exceeded my expectations, and I think because he really was just like, I'm gonna be Ken. I'm gonna do it all the way, and I'm not gonna leave anything left for anybody to want. Just yeah. What do you guys think?
I think that him in particular, like especially the sequences when Barbie Lynn turns into, it is called Kendom, isn't it? Is that what they call it? Yeah. Almost any other actor plays that part, I think it comes off hokey.
Yes.
And I think that he does it in such a, again, it's a playful ridiculousness, but there's also an element of it that is serious. And I think that both of them should get nominated. I hope they both do.
I do too.
Margot and Gosling. I think Gosling's part is obviously a little more showy because of the extremes. Like Margot's part and her role, I think, is more important, essential, and has a lot more depth to it.
Yeah.
But
she needed to be grounded in order for the heart of the story to actually come through.
I would agree. but I think that this is one of Gosling's better performances because of the extreme nature that and journey he goes on as a character, that you see again from, I mean, like, every line delivery to me is funny. Like, and it doesn't matter if he's yelling something ridiculous or like early on in the movie he's like, I'm thinking I'm staying over tonight.
Yeah.
And she's like, why would you think something like that? And just like even something as little, and again goes back to the writing and how brilliant the writing is for this movie, which I don't know if you guys saw, they're on like a interesting campaign right now, early Oscar talks, whether they're gonna go for adapted screenplay or original screenplay. I don't know exactly why that is, but I know that one of the films that they said suffered from this in the past was Lego Movie, because I guess it could technically be like Lego Movie is another film that I think they went for original screenplay, but they could have gone for adapted screenplay because it's based on an IP. I think.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But they're contemplating it, and
I think Greta should go for original.
Interesting.
I think she should.
I definitely think that she should because it's her original screenplay, but I think they have a better chance of maybe not, because one of the films we're going to talk about is technically going to be adapted.
Yes.
So
I think that she should go for original just because I just think the writing in this film is incredible because she's not trying to be funny at any moment. She's honestly just giving like real, honest, like things that happen in life, and then they just happen to be funny because people are able to relate to them.
Mhm.
Like one of I don't know why, but this like really stuck with me, and just because it's so funny, it's just real, is when so all the Barbies are like manipulated and they're trying to like unmanipulate them with like being like under like the Ken spell or whatever it is. And so they're doing all the things like, oh, you need to pretend to be like bad at a sport so that they can help you. But one of my favorite parts was like, you need to ask them to explain the Godfather to you. And I died at that because it's not a funny line. Like if somebody said to you like, oh, like a guy's going to explain the Godfather to you, like that's not necessarily a punchline. But because I think so many people are able to relate to that in a sense, that it becomes funny. I also think she was so aware, like the one line where she was like, when they're trying to make that connection of like Barbie doesn't feel pretty anymore, and then they say like, note for the producers, if you're trying to make this like stick with the audience, don't cast Margot Robbie, which is just a level of awareness as a writer that in order to have that, it makes the audience appreciate you more because you're like, wow, you don't think we're stupid. Like, you know that we're on the same level as you, which I just love. And
there's such a level of trust between the cast and the crew, too, that they're able to be playful in a moment like that. And I love how you just touched upon being, again, the film is obviously self-aware. Very self-aware. But it doesn't explain things to you in a way that it makes you feel stupid. We had a conversation about this last night.
Yeah.
But I can't stand films or any piece of, like, conversation or anything like that where someone tries to explain something to you to make you feel stupid. And I think that, again, there's such a care given to the writing process. And writing, I think, is so important to Greta, like maybe more than directing. Like the story is so essential to her, and that's why I think this film is a major win in terms of everything. Zach, what are your thoughts on Greta's whole take on this as a whole? And then if you want to dive into the box office of it all, because I mean, a historic first week for this film. We're not even at a week yet when we're recording this, but I mean, the film is breaking records everywhere.
First weekend blew everything out of the water. Crazy.
Yeah. So just based off the stats, opening weekend, this was also historic for many reasons, but for Greta, this is her biggest opening film, the biggest opening for any female director domestically. Brought in $155.5 million.
Yes, get it.
Yeah, and it passed Captain Marvel, which was a couple of years ago. Anna Boden had brought in $153 million.
And not to cut you off, but Captain Marvel is also not a wholly directed female film because Anna Boden does films with I don't know if it's her partner, Ryan Fleck, I believe, is the other director, but they co-direct on everything. Okay. So this is a wholly female-fronted directing job. So yes.
Yeah. And then just trusting Greta of all people too with a female led image of Barbie was very important. I think it also proved that to its success. Like I think if you did take Margot and Ryan out of the equation, the performances would have been different, but I think people still would have backed a Greta film from the start. Um, so this was a very important film for many reasons we kind of went over, but it also received a 90% audience and critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't know if anyone expected it to be that high.
I did.
You did.
I did.
I was probably predicting like a 75 to like 85 range, or like maxing out at 85. Just because I didn't know how critics would see it. But I mean, 90% is awesome. That's 100% fresh in my mind. But yeah, so great week at the box office, especially for going up at the same time against Christopher Nolan and Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And that was the whole social media
Which
competition.
do you guys think that's what contributed to this being such a successful film its first weekend? Is that kind of like, ooh, I gotta go do a double feature?
I think it contributed, but I don't know if it was the sole reason that it did that well. And it actually made almost double the amount that Oppenheimer did. It's more of a commercialized movie than Oppenheimer is.
Yeah.
So, and it's a comedy. It's not fully family friendly, but it is for the most part a family friendly movie, and it's something people are familiar with. So I think it brought in a lot of money, and then they had big stars, big director attached. So
I think the social movement aspect. I actually think the social movement aspect of it probably actually helped Oppenheimer a little more than Barbie. But I think that the one thing I think we can all agree on is having movies that are not wholly original, because again, Barbie is based on an IP, and we'll get into a larger discussion about Oppenheimer in a little bit, and that's based on a real person. But there was such a cultural awareness of these two films facing off against one another that it became a moment where there was such a juxtaposition too between the two that everyone was like, wow, we finally get to go to the movies on one weekend where there are two wholly different movies that have different ideas and different perspectives, and we can dive in. And it was like I feel like awakened by like this weekend at the cinema, like just being able to see these two films and going with different mindsets and having like great reactions to both of them. And I think again it paid off not only financially, but again, as Zach just touched on a little bit, the critic score and the audience score at a 90% is huge on Rotten Tomatoes. But I think both of these films critically are going to prosper. I think there's going to be a lot. These films are going to be in the conversation from now until Oscar season, which I guess is in like February.
Yeah.
So like we're going to be doing this for a while. And I think the rewatchability to these movies are going to continue to gross a lot of money. I want to go see Barbie again.
I do too.
The other thing with Barbie, again, has made more money than Oppenheimer, but it's a movie that is a lot more digestible than Oppenheimer because of its runtime and because of the playfulness and the humor to it. So I think that I did think it was going to end up around that score, and I'm glad that it did because I think it's a really great movie. Is there any other last minute things we want to talk about? Do we want to give scores? I will say, going into this discussion, I had a lower score, and now it's higher.
Ooh,
So
okay.
I still stand by my statements, but it is a higher score than I originally intended.
what's your score? You started.
My score for Barbie would probably be an 8.4.
You
out
did
of
go
10.
higher.
I did
because
go
you told me
higher.
something lower
I
yesterday.
did. So I'm at an 8.4 for Barbie. I think that just really quick, just touch, because we're going to talk about this movie, like I said, for a very long time coming into Oscar season. I'm hoping for writing and directing nominations, hoping for a Best Picture nom, based on what I've seen so far. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. The soundtrack, I guess, like
I
a
love
song.
it.
I don't think the score, because it's very poppy, and I think that's the point. I don't think it's gonna get like a score nomination or anything. because they're two different things.
Yeah.
I hope so. I love the soundtrack.
But it's different. Soundtrack is technically different than
the
score.
compositions.
guess.
Yeah, I think Dua Lipa's song will
Yes.
get a nod.
I think
I'm Just Ken.
I think I'm gonna agree with Liz. I think I'm Just Ken probably gets the original song nomination.
Oh.
Just from what I
think.
see on social media, that people are like, yes, give it to me.
And
like,
I do
that's the
again.
song that
I think
want.
they want the Academy is definitely gonna want Ryan Gosling up on stage performing
because
that.
then they can get more views.
Exactly.
Like they need people to come back
Yeah.
to watching the shows.
Yeah, and then production design again. I hope it gets a nom. So I'm hoping. I really love the movie.
I think Greta will get directing too.
Yes, did I not say that? I thought
I don't
did.
know
I
if
think
you got
you
to.
did.
I hope.
that.
I definitely hope and think she deserves a Best Director nomination. Again, if she goes adapted screenplay, I think it's gonna be tough. I think there's a lot of films like we've thought. Past Lives will get an and that's not original
It's
screenplay.
original.
Past Lives is gonna have that. That's two different mediums right there. And then adapted at least Oppenheimer, I think, and then Killers of the Flower Moon, which we haven't seen yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, anytime Scorsese's writing a script, it's usually up there. So,
It is.
but anyway, let's go, Liz, to what you thought.
I have no complaints. Not a single thing that I could honestly. I really wouldn't change a single thing about this movie. So I'm gonna give it a 10.
Whoa,
10 out of
big
10.
score!
I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved everything.
Wow.
And I usually don't. I usually am like 9.5, but
9.7.
Yeah.
No, I love that. Stick with it.
I'm gonna be facetious to Darian. I'm gonna give it an 8.5.
Oh, okay.
I give it like an 8.5, 8.5.
Okay, wow.
Well, is it 8 or is it 8.5?
Yeah.
Well, I just rated it, because I didn't have the 0.5, 0.4s but so now
Oh, okay.
but yeah, I'll give it.
Do you go that way? You go like a half or a full? You don't give anything.
Not really. No, with the letter.
Zach's struggling. Right now.
I'm switching the button over here. And I would, because Letterbox is out of 5, so I did 4 out of 5, so that's like 8 out of 10 on IMDb.
Round it up to 9.
So sure, let's give it.
Let's give it a
All
9.
right, all right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Should we dive right into Oppenheimer or?
All right, so we're back. We're talking about Oppenheimer, the latest film from the Christopher Nolan filmography, starring Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer, the renowned scientist who created the atomic bomb.
Bum, bum, bum.
All right. So much to talk about with this film. Again, a complete polar opposite of what Barbie is, but perfect for all audiences to go to the movies. So before we jump into this, again, just another message to all of you watching this. I'm hoping you're watching this because you've seen both movies, because we're going to dive into spoilers for this film as well. But go to the movies, see Oppenheimer, see Barbie, see more movies. As much as I love the MCU and I love comic book films and all the big tent poles, we need some more voices right now in film and television. Really probably more film right now. And both of these films, I think all three of us can commend and talk about how great we love these movies.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive right in. This is a movie that very different than the inception of what Barbie was, a movie that was gestating for a really long time. Oppenheimer and Christopher Nolan in general as a filmmaker is someone that just comes up with an idea and he writes the script and then he just goes to work. There's not a lot of reporting ahead of time on what he's going to be doing next, because he usually doesn't know what he's going to be doing next. The only time that he's not one of those filmmakers where as he's wrapping up one film, he's already one foot is out the door. He's already thinking about the next project.
Mm-hmm.
He's not that type of filmmaker, except probably when he was doing the Dark Knight trilogy with Christian Bale.
Mm-hmm.
So, but he's a long time away from that. His more recent films before this, he did, remind me, Zach, what did he do right before this?
Tenet.
He did Tenet right before this, which was released during COVID. And then before that, he did Dunkirk, correct?
Dunkirk. Yes.
Dunkirk, yeah. So let's dive right in. I'm going to start with Zach, because Zach is our resident Christopher Nolan fanboy, which we love that about him. But let's
Don't
talk.
let us down.
I guess I
Zach.
am,
Don't
yeah.
let us
Let's
down.
talk about Oppenheimer.
Coming off of our box office talk with Barbie as well. So the numbers were posted for those two. This was I think the third weekend in movie history that it boasted a cumulative return of about 230 or
for the two
250.
films combined,
The
right?
two films
I
combined.
think it's the fourth
yeah.
highest grossing film weekend
Yeah.
domestically ever.
Yeah,
I believe.
it is a lot of money that they raked in, and Oppenheimer came away with 80.5 million. This is Nolan's third largest opening ever, and if you take Batman out of the equation entirely, this is his biggest opening ever. So it's a huge movie. It's had a lot of hype for a while. I was a little surprised that it did make this much money on opening weekend, given the runtime of it. I thought that 3 hours would dissuade a lot of people from seeing it, as a general audience member.
Yeah.
But I was really happy to see that it made that much money, and the budget was for me. This is very surprising because it's at only $100 million, and especially that it was shot on 70 millimeter IMAX, which is the highest quality that you can get in film technology at the moment. It is the most expensive film stock that you can use and then also they had to do a 3-hour film, so that's who knows how many hours of footage that they actually amassed.
Well, the film, I
Yeah.
don't know if you saw it, the film actually only took 47 days to film.
Which is insane.
It's a for a movie at this caliber, this big, this broad of an idea, and where basically what it does is it encompasses a whole man's life.
Yeah.
For it to only take 47 days, and with this remarkable cast we'll get into, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, and then I agree. It is really unbelievable when you say 47 days is not a lot to some people, but it's when you're talking about movie making and then to make it to this skill level, that is pretty incredible. So this film is also based off of the book American Prometheus, which does encapsulate most of Oppenheimer's career, his life's work, especially the atom bomb. And this movie is not a strict World War II movie either. It is about this. I mean, in its basic diluted sense, it's about the morality of using the bomb and its creation and this shadow that it has casted on the world ever since it's been created, and the morality of using it in such a moment in the war, and then his ego and if it overcame himself, and his love for science. And he loved contributing a lot of work into science, creating something. He always wanted to have something that he came out on top with his knowledge and things that he's encountered throughout his career. So he really wanted to contribute to society in some way, but over the course of the film, you see his deterioration with like his own moral compass. He's like, did I really create something that was good for men or not? So I think that was the biggest theme of the movie. But yeah, for Nolan too, a lot of people regard The Dark Knight as his best movie, one of the best movies ever made. And to see him create something at this magnitude and firing on all cylinders this late in his career, not really late, but he's been working for over 20 years now in big movies, and The Dark Knight was 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So to see him still have this capability to make something so well crafted while sprinkling in his roots throughout it too was really cool to see. So yeah, what do you guys think about the film? What are your first thoughts? Liz, do you have something to add?
I do. I think this displays so perfectly Nolan's point of view in all of his films, because he likes to take these like big topics or kind of like these big events, but then focus in to make it more personal. Because I don't think this film would be as successful if it was just a broad story of like, let's tell the atomic bomb story and like the history behind it, because then you get a little bit into documentary-ish vibes. And he's just able to make this story super personal, kind of talking about the psyche of scientists also in a way without totally telling you what his opinion is also. He kind of just says like, these are the issues that scientists deal with when they are making these incredible things in a scientific world. But then if you bring it to the real world, like then they also deal with these moral dilemmas. And he doesn't really give like an answer on like, does Nolan think that the atomic bomb was the worst thing to ever be created? He just says like, people have thought that, and then leaves the audience to walk away deciding it for yourself, which I love, because if he ended it with a solidified like opinion, I feel like people would have walked away, been not talking about it as much, because now it's a topic of like, what did you think? What did you walk away with? Like the dilemma is crazy if you think about it. Like here he made this incredible thing that he should be going down in history as like one of the smartest people to ever create something. But then at the same time, it's like, he made something that completely changed our entire world.
That's a great point about like just as a filmmaker too.
Mhm.
And if you stitch a fixed opinion into a movie, I think that's where a lot of people get lost, or they check out and they're like, oh, this wasn't really for me. Or like a lot of people do want to walk into something and make their own opinions on it.
Yes.
And then especially for movies that you want to escape reality from, or this is a nonfiction movie. Like this all really happened, but he still crafted it in a way where you could deduce your own opinions about it. So I thought that was really cool. It's a good point.
Yeah, so I loved that. I feel like all of his films do that, but I think this one specifically, he just dove into more of the psychological elements of his lead character rather than leaning on like the story, which I liked.
Yeah, I think there's an openness that goes into his filmmaking and his writing, which he talked about in a recent interview with Entertainment Weekly, that he thinks that the people that don't know anything about Robert Oppenheimer's story will get the most out of the movie. Mm-hmm. And as someone who, again, I don't know what your guys' level of expertise in terms of Oppenheimer going into this, but for me, not knowing much about it other than associating his name with the creation of the atom bomb, there was nothing. So being able to walk in with what is generally an empty slate for a movie of this magnitude, there's something where he's able to showcase history in a way where it feels so much more personal to every single viewing experience. And I know one of the things Matt Damon, who's one of the stars of this film, talked about is that the script was also written in first person, which is super interesting because it's able to give even just the actors and the performers of it this sensibility of perspective and how Oppenheimer felt based on the book that Zach had talked about, American Prometheus. There's so much in this film where you, again, like, there are a lot of fly on the wall sequences, and for a 3-hour movie, which I think we disagree on this, so I'm excited to get into this conversation, but I think the film is like perfectly paced, and even though it's a 3-hour movie, I was always excited and wanting more information about this guy. From the very beginning, there was something about the moment the movie starts, you're just encapsulated by who this guy is, why they want him to create this thing, what are the other elements of his life besides the science. And you see some of it play out with his marriage to Kitty, played by Emily Blunt, and one of his mistresses, who's played by Florence Pugh, Jean Talcott, I believe her name was. So just in terms of let's bounce off that for a second. In terms of the pacing, again, it's a 3-hour movie. It's a long runtime. It's not for everybody. But I do think that when you have a longer runtime and sometimes someone's like, oh, it's a slow burn. Some people are good with slow burns. Some people aren't good with slow burns. I don't think this movie is a slow burn at all, but what's your take on the runtime?
No, I don't think it's a slow burn, but I do think it was 45 minutes way too long. I think, I just think we're making films so long now that you start to lose, like, okay, what is the story that we're starting to tell? Because I personally think he told two stories in that film. He told the story of the atomic bomb and Oppenheimer's involvement in it, but then also told the aftermath of it, of Oppenheimer's life and how it didn't go the way kind of that he planned his life after it would be. Which I get that they're entwined together, but I think to make a film, like maybe pick one. But if you're trying to tell the whole story, I kind of think that it should have been a limited series almost. I know Nolan won't probably ever do a television.
Probably not.
Probably not. It would have been incredible, but I just think this story, in my opinion, he bit off a little bit too much to give an audience, because there were moments that there's just so much information, because I was one of those audience members that I didn't really know anything about this story and like Oppenheimer's story. And so for me, I was playing catch up a lot of the time of just trying to be like, okay, so who is that? And I didn't really catch people's names. I was kind of more just like, okay, like this character who did that, and just trying to pay attention, where I do feel like I lost a lot of maybe the pre-story of what led Oppenheimer to being an incredible scientist. Kind of when he was like going to school in I think it was Cambridge.
When he was teaching, you're saying? Or,
no, early
on.
on. Like I felt like they just like powered through that beginning sequence of giving you backstory just so that they could get to the meat of the story. But then it's like, don't give us that if you're not going to set us up to actually be able to understand it.
But you don't think any of seeing some of his upbringing, and again, like some of his actions as a human being, right? So again, like you start to see his ties to the Communist Party, which eventually comes up as a major plot point towards the end of the film, when I don't want to call it a trial, and I know it's called something. Do you know exactly what they call it when he's being questioned? He's basically getting interrogated and he's losing.
Well, they're trying to take away his reputation.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
But it's like some type of there was a word for it, but I'm blanking.
They put Oppenheimer in a room and they question him as if it is a trial, and he has a lawyer there, but they're not. Every time that his lawyer kind of throws back another point on why it wouldn't be acceptable in a court of law, they're like, well, this is not a trial, so like it's like you're not on trial, you're not going to be convicted of anything, so there's no need. But again, they're destroying his reputation, and someone who is has such a big ego as he does, though there is a humanistic and like loving quality to his character and for the that he has towards the world and science and people. You don't think that any of the excuse me, the things that we see early on in the film, like I said, the Communist Party, the moral dilemma he has in the very beginning of the film where he puts the cyanide in his professor's apple and it almost winds up killing his idol in life. So like, you don't think any of that is essential to what we eventually get?
So I think it could be an essential part, but I just feel like you gave that time to showing him trying to like kill his professor, when you could have given that time to kind of flesh out a little bit more of like the stories of some of the other characters. Like I felt like kind of like how you felt with Barbie. Like I felt like there were 3 different storylines going on. I felt like it was the atomic bomb sequence, it was his trial, not trial, and then it was
the actual trial
that was going on. And I get they're all connected, but I just felt like these are all huge elements in themselves. Like none of them are really subplots. Like it's not like, oh, we can just show a scene of this really quickly. Like they're all main sequences, which it's just like, it's a lot to give an audience in 3 hours to digest all that. And I think, like personally, I don't really know if I'll go back and watch Oppenheimer again just because of the length. And I don't think a lot of people will, even though I probably did miss a lot of it just because I was trying to pay attention so much. But then I was like, wait, I don't really understand what they're saying or what they're talking about right now.
Okay. Zach?
The only thing I would try to unpack the ideas with like the storylines and the stuff like that. I think it all added up to his ego, his moral stance on the bomb. Like the whole purpose of the lawyers, and like they were coming after him because he was outspoken about the use of the bomb after the war. And he's like, I don't think that what we created was something that we necessarily need to use anymore. And it also tied into the McCarthyism of the communism. So they were really trying to shut him up in government and try and take away his reputation, his namesake, and embarrass him. So I think they were setting up all of those elements and they were sprinkling them in there throughout the film. They were like, okay, he's a communist in the beginning, so that's going to come up later. That's going to be a problem for him politically. His ego and his undying love to prove himself scientifically led to his own destruction in a way. And he gave this ability to people and the whole bomb and everything. And then I think just the trial stuff with Robert Downey Jr. that he's another guy, spoiler alert, he's going after Oppenheimer. I mean, it's history too, so it's not really a spoiler, but he's going after Oppenheimer. And I to your point of like the limited series thing, I think that it could have been a limited series. I don't know how much material was like if they skipped over anything in the book that was not all there, or if there's more important events of his life that they just didn't get to. But I think that I think my one point too I was going to say is if they did this story completely chronologically, like if they started at his early life and then they went to the trial, or they went to the bomb. The bomb happened. The bomb is like the action that people are showing up for in the movie in my mind. And then if you had the last hour and a half of just the trial, you would have had people leaving, or you would have had people really getting lost. I would have been bored if I just watched an hour and a half straight of trial talking at tables. So I think the way that Nolan kept you interested and intrigued at, okay, what is this person and what is their significance? Like, and then you start to see little things come up later. There was the one thing, especially with Einstein, of like, oh, what did he say to Oppenheimer? Like, what's that little element? And then they reveal that conversation at the end.
Yeah,
so
that was great.
That was a great
part.
That
was really great.
Yeah, and that's kind of separate from what you're talking about. But yeah, I think that I think there was some stuff that they could have cut. Like if you're thinking like 3 hours, sure. But I think that there was some stuff that was important to his character and to the guy that we know as Oppenheimer that they really wanted to convey to the audience, because he wasn't a good person at all when you boil it down.
I think Cillian Murphy's performance is just incredible because you have such empathy for this character. And you don't really see him at times as a villain necessarily, or you don't see him as like somebody that you're like, oh God, I hope that they find him like guilty in a way. You are rooting for him the whole time, which I think is great, because if he was just a hateable character, I don't think anybody would really love this film as much as people are loving it.
Yeah. I think, like, to your point, like you do feel empathy for him and you are rooting for him.
You do.
But he does have conflicted morals in his marriage, in his science, in his beliefs. So that's all transfixed in this web of stuff, which they did really well, of just like, this guy is super conflicted, but you're rooting for him.
Yeah.
And then he keeps making mistakes as simple as like, dude, don't cheat on your wife. Like, don't do that. That's just like you got everything else going on. Come on, man. So, but then, yeah, so I think that they really emphasized he was not a perfect person. And then he recalls his imperfections in the hearing. I think we're going to call it a hearing. Maybe we'll call it a hearing.
Okay. Instead of trial.
Yeah. And then with the lawyers and everything. So they're literally walking through his life and they're like, oh, you did this. What was your relationship with this person?
Yeah, exactly. So I think.
So you guys wouldn't take anything out.
Yeah. So that's what I was just
I don't think I would.
Okay.
Just for me.
I think that, again, like funnily enough, the opposite of how
You feel for
I
Barbie.
feel about Barbie. I don't think there's anything that I would cut out of this movie. I think that it's such an expansive exploration of this human being that Nolan wants to showcase that society does not know for anything other than one thing.
Mhm.
And he's so much more than that. And you see it based on like what Zach was just saying too. There's such a moral core that is on and off with this character. And just to piggyback off what you said, Cillian Murphy, first of all, I'm so happy he gets a showcase like this. And I mean, Peaky Blinders, if you guys don't watch Peaky Blinders, watch it. But like, he doesn't get a lot of lead roles, and he's been in a shit ton of Nolan movies. And he's great in Inception. He's great as Scarecrow. But this is a character, first of all, you just see the pain in his eyes in so many scenes in this movie. And the aging process that you see with his character.
It's so good.
It's incredible. And there's just so much to me in this movie that I wouldn't want to cut out, because me personally, I like these personal stories about people. I don't know, I gravitate towards more personal relationships. And like, I think that's the reason, not to go too off track, but like in Marvel movies that I do enjoy, the personal relationships that you start to see the characters develop with one another is what emphasizes it for me. I think this is the most personal of any movie Nolan's ever done. And I think that he realized that in reading the book, that there was so much that he learned, that he's like, there is so much here that we can interpret in so many different ways based on this guy that is only known really generally for one thing. And I know he talked about too in the Entertainment Weekly interview with Robert Downey. It was him, Robert Downey Jr., Matt Damon, Emily Blunt, Cillian Murphy. Just some of the remarkable cast that we'll get into in a little bit. But he talks about how he wasn't going to name this film American Prometheus. He was just going to name it Oppenheimer, because there was so much in that, just him as a man and what he went through, that had to do with everything that came before, during, and after the building of the atomic bomb. And I do understand what you're saying, and I think Zach was talking about it too. So many viewers went into this film for that sequence.
Yeah.
I went into this as like, this is a Christopher Nolan movie, and there's a remarkable cast, and I'm interested to learn something new. And I think, based on what you were saying, like, you felt like there was too much. I felt like it was fed to me in the perfect meal.
Okay.
I felt like every single thing was a course.
Satisfied.
I left more than satisfied. I felt like, again, it's like when you go through something where you have like maybe like a 4-course meal, but then you leave and you're like, I feel so perfect with what I just ate. Like, I was like finger licking at the end of this movie. And there's like I said, there's so much we could talk about. I want to dive into the cast a little more, because it's just remarkable the amount of talent that is in this film, and has these little bit parts, or in other films too, it would be like very, very small parts, but everyone is unbelievable in this movie. I mean, I think Matt Damon is having a hell of a year.
He is. I love it.
Between this and Air, I think, and Matt Damon was previously in Interstellar. And there was something, I don't know if you guys saw this, I thought this was really funny. He openly and explicitly talked about this, that in couples counseling with his wife, she wanted him to take some time off of acting. And he's like, I was able to finagle in saying, like, making an agreement with his wife and the therapist. I promise I will take a year off unless Nolan calls.
Oh,
and he's like, and he specifically talked about, because you don't know when he's gonna call, because no one is aware when this guy's making a new movie until he makes the call and he calls you. And then Damon got offered this, and he plays a general in the film, and he's so great in it. Again, Emily Blunt, give her all the flowers.
Oh my
I
gosh.
can't wait. If she's not nominated, it's complete and utter robbery.
Wrong.
Yeah, she's
wrong.
so great in this movie as Kitty Oppenheimer, Robert Oppenheimer's wife. And again, we talked about Cillian Murphy. He's the obvious standout, right?
Yeah.
But all these other people, I mean, Oscar winners. Rami Malek has one scene, like one essential scene in the film that is
talking.
Yeah.
You get a cameo performance from an Oscar winner in Casey Affleck. So intimidating in that scene. Jason Clarke as
he was so good.
So good as the the opposing lawyer in the hearing.
Rob or
Yes.
something.
Robbie or something along the lines of
Yeah.
that. Robbie something. No, I would say Robbie Ray. That's a baseball player. But all those performances. I mean, then you have a scene of Gary Oldman, another Oscar winner, that's in one scene. David Krumholtz, who plays his friend, the Bronx Jewish scientist in his own right. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think he's great in everything he does, but so great in this movie. I mean, there's so many performances to take away. Florence Pugh, again, also in it. We definitely want to hear Liz's take on that because she has some strong opinions on her character. But just in terms of the performances in general, Liz, was there like some of the standouts for you?
I mean, Emily Blunt for me, she really stood out as a supporting actor for me because she didn't just let it be like the side wife. She really was like, I mean, it was incredible. She was an alcoholic. She was a mother who is not good at being a mother, which I'm so glad that they touched on that because I feel like this time period, it's very easy just to be like, oh, motherhood is what women are meant for and what they were meant to do at this time. So let's just have you be like a good mom and like take care of the children while he's the one that's like not present. But instead it's her being like, I don't want to take care of my child anymore. Like I don't want to do this, which is huge because it just never explained ever in time pieces like this. And I also love that she gave a whole life to a character and not just making it like the wife. And I don't know if that was her or Nolan that specifically went that route, but they really pushed the envelope and I loved it.
How great is her scene in the hearing?
Oh, it's everything.
It's so good. Yes.
It's because there's a moment where you're like, oh man, she's been asking him to fight this whole because the whole movie she's just like, I want you to fight, like stand up and like do something. And then it comes to her moment and you're like, oh girl, like you're not gonna fight now, like you're just gonna kind of like cry and just like let them walk all over you when you've been complaining to your husband saying like he needs to stand up for himself, and then all of a sudden she snaps into it and is just like, I'll play if you want to play.
I love the direction in that scene too when Jason Clarke's character kind of scoots towards her and tries to like manhandle her, for the lack of a better term, or
like intimidate her, but kind of in like a, oh, you're crying, like I'll help you, like what's wrong, like very condescending.
Incredible. And I know I didn't forget, but Robert Downey Jr., another, I think that, so just we'll get into the full thing later. Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Emily Blunt, if all of them don't get nominated, it's robbery for this movie.
It really is.
And it's great to see him in a performance. I think he's great as Tony Stark in the MCU, but getting away from that and having, I mean, the last movie he did, I'm pretty sure before this, was Doolittle. Like he hasn't done anything in a long time. And
did you see what he said too about just acting after the MCU in general? He said like he had to find himself acting again. Like he kind of fell out of that because he was stuck in a formula of Tony Stark. He'd also been playing him for almost a decade. Yeah. So
Doolittle was his last
over a decade.
thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that was right before the pandemic. I believe that came out January of 2020.
It was 2020.
Yeah. So being able to see an actor of his caliber, I mean, a 2-time Oscar nominee for nothing in the MCU, Tropic Thunder, and playing Charlie Chaplin in the 90s, like being able to see him showcased to this level and playing such a villainous character in such a, and not a in your face villain either. No. Someone that there was an element of him, and he talks very much of that opposing perspective towards the end of the film, right? When he's talking to Alden Ehrenreich's character about how Oppenheimer, he's like, he just gets everything he wants, and he's an egotistical maniac, and this guy is the father of science, and all because of one moment where he's embarrassed, and you see the vindictiveness and the ruthlessness of his character in such a quiet and mild-mannered way. And the scene where they have the meeting between all the scientists and him in the back room is, oh my God, too, that round table of talent and writing and all of it to me. Again, I think he's great. If either one of you guys want to.
No, I mean, I agree with everything that you just said. I think he is incredible. I think that he plays a really good job of like being a wolf in like a sheep's clothing kind of throughout the film, because I don't think as an audience member you catch on until almost after the bomb happens. I think they hide it really well because at first I feel like you're just kind of like, okay, like this guy is just here to like kind of narrate almost in a way.
100%. That's what I felt.
Right? And that he's just here to like be the talking point of like, this is why we're going into Oppenheimer's history. It's because of this trial.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden it's revealed and then you start picking up and you're like, oh wait, what, like something's going on with this character. And like, he really is saying horrible things actually about Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And I loved the reveal of him being like,
I had gasps in my theater.
did you?
I did, which again I think plays into that. Not to damper like your point of cutting things out of the film, but I think that's why there's going back to that expansiveness of what this life embodies and how people don't really understand the full breadth of what J. Robert Oppenheimer's life is and was.
Mm-hmm.
Having something like that like Zach said, it's history. There's no spoiler here. You could look up what actually happened. Again, we're talking about an interpretation and recalling historical events. So there might be some elements of this that might have been
like I wouldn't know.
Over dramatized, exactly. Thank you.
Wouldn't know this. I'm taking all of this as real history.
Well, that's I think I don't know if I'm the same way. Sometimes I watch movies and I'm like, that's exactly how it happened. But it's not actually. He
said that exact thing to her.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. But I thought that again, being able to have a twist in, I don't want to say it's a biopic because it's so much more than that, but it is. It's a biographical picture based on J. Robert Oppenheimer's life. Being able to have a twist in a biopic is so difficult to do because we're talking about a majorly historical figure here. So, yeah, I thought that the way Nolan played that, and again, I think that lends itself to the pacing of the film. And I don't know when in the runtime the atomic bomb goes off, but I believe there's like an hour of the movie afterwards, and for me, it flew by. So, yeah.
Well, because I feel like in a way the bomb was obviously it was a big moment, but I don't feel like it was the full climax of the story. I feel like it wasn't until that shoe dropped of like what actually happened after was what the actual like tip of the storyline was.
Which I think Nolan is really good at subverting expectations because of that in a lot of his movies. I think Interstellar does a really good job of that too.
Yeah.
So I appreciated him being able to craft this very personal story around something that everybody knows this one guy for. Zach, what's your take on like the I mean, I guess the movie as a whole too, like the performances, just where are you at with this movie?
I was gonna kind of circle back to what we were saying about his most personal film, because I do agree with what you're saying about that. And I read this Roger Ebert article. It was part of the review, and they were saying that, you know, Christopher Nolan suspended a lot of his original techniques with these mind-bending thrillers. You know, that's kind of something very typical of his world building or his, you know, grand over the top stories that he really does create very well. And he kind of threw out a lot of those elements while keeping, I mean, he did encapsulate a lot of story in this 3-hour mark, but he threw out a little bit of those elements, sprinkled in those roots of like black and white to color, like Memento. He has a lot of his, you know, his action is very no CGI, very physical. He tries to make everything as personal and authentic as possible. And then he just puts a personal figure in history like Oppenheimer, whose life does read like a screenplay in a movie, and he puts him in a box, and then he basically pits him against himself in ways while giving him those mistaken circumstances. And there was actually, you know, kind of going back to some of his other movies too, like the end of Dark Knight, everybody has to hate Batman. Batman says, I have to, you know, be the one that they cast out, not Harvey Dent. And it had a little bit of a callback too in the end of Oppenheimer is that conversation with Einstein, the first half of it is he's like, you know, people will begin to cast you out again, like for your creation, whether that's a good or bad thing, because they're jealous or they'll betray you and other stuff. And then they go through that whole sequence where he's at the White House, he's getting a medal, shaking hands with the same people that casted him out, and that they're like, yeah,
That's
he's
a great
really not.
sequence.
It's
Yeah,
so
that was an
good.
amazing sequence. And then of course, you know, God sent Emily Blunt is like,
She's
I'm
like,
gonna
I'm not
shake
shaking
your hand. Yeah, I'm like,
Love
thank
it.
you. Somebody didn't do it. I was like, dude, don't shake their hand.
Mhm.
But, yeah, that was another thing that like felt like it trickled over, and then just the movie was very personal. It wasn't that hero's journey like we're gonna go through time and space, and then we're gonna go through, you know, like Gotham City, like chaos and all this anarchy happening. It was men and women pitted against themselves, his own ego pitted against him. It was man versus self, it was man versus nature, man versus man. Like it was everything all in one. And he, like you were saying too, didn't stitch in an opinion. He left it up for people to grab at. You know, was this a good creation? You can see how much it weighs on this person. What is your takeaway? That's what he's asking the audience, which is, I think, what the best filmmakers do is they want you to make your own conclusions. So that was my take on it. But yeah,
I loved it.
so,
I think too, I really appreciated, again, because so much, there is a lot of heavy lifting in terms of just the name recognition of so many people, not only like the faces that we associate with the actors, but the literal names of all these different scientists that he's bringing in. And I thought a lot of the Los Alamos stuff I really loved. And that and the hearing, being able to see the way that Oppenheimer would deal with certain scientists and the repercussions that had later, as well as when he was in his own hearing, and you see, though they all work in the same field, every single person, to me anyway, had their own very distinct personality. Josh Hartnett's character, I loved that.
Yeah.
man.
He was
So
fantastic.
good.
First of all, remember maybe almost a decade ago now at this point, we had The Reconnaissance for Matthew McConaughey.
yeah.
I want Josh Hartnett to get like leading roles. I think
He's
he
just
was
coming back.
Oh. I was like, what are you talking about for a second?
Oh,
Matthew
so
McConaughey. I was
let's
like,
start
what?
the Hartnett sense. That probably isn't
Yeah.
right phonetically, but I would love to see him in more things, and I love this the again the direction in this movie. But when he comes down the stairs and he's about to go into the hearing, and David Krumholtz's character gives him this look, and he realizes how broken of a man Oppenheimer is, and he's going in with an intention that he's going to be honest, and he doesn't agree with especially all the commie things that he had backed up for so many years, and he just walks away. And it's an awesome moment. And again, like his character, Krumholtz's character, Matthew Modine, going in the hearing and just being like, I'm not fucking dealing with this. Putting his glasses on and going, good luck, guys, I'm done. Matt Damon, like, and then that look that he gives him, like, I got your back, man. Like, I picked you, I selected you to create this atom bomb, even though you gave me to my face the reason why I should not pick you. And I still picked you because I knew you were the only person that could do this job. No matter how destructive this job literally and figuratively will be in your life and the world, in the world's hands. Like, it just, I don't know. Again, I think the movie is almost perfect. And I think this is one of Nolan's greatest movies ever, which again, for such an extensive filmography, I think that's, again, like Zach was saying, it's more than 20 years in the film industry, and you're still kind of one-upping a lot of these movies that you've done. Like, I mean, The Dark Knight, The Prestige, Interstellar, Inception,
Interstellar,
Memento, Dunkirk, all these remarkable movies, and this 3-hour epic about one guy's life that, again, as Zach was saying, seemed that he just went against everything that he has, the methodology of how he creates films. Being able to do this movie with $100 million budget, with such a big story, and put it on such a pedestal, I think it's really amazing.
I am curious. You said almost perfect. So what would you say you disagreed with or didn't like in the film?
I think that there are some elements in terms of the way that I do appreciate sometimes show don't tell, but there were some moments in this film that I thought were too showy. Again, this is a spoiler. It doesn't even have to really do with the story, and that's why I think it's such an unnecessary thing.
Yeah.
But and we haven't talked much about her character, so I think this is a perfect transition point. But Florence Pugh's character of Jean Talcott is his mistress, J. Robert Oppenheimer's mistress, who he actually formed a relationship with prior to his marriage to Kitty Oppenheimer, which, again, let's remind everybody, too. Kitty cheated on her husband. J. Robert Oppenheimer cheated on who he was with at the time.
Yeah.
So they're all bad people. But I shouldn't say that. But regardless.
Well, and wasn't she married like 3 times? Didn't they say?
Yeah, she goes.
Three.
She actually goes through all her marriages in the sequence where they go to Los Alamos together.
Yes.
But there's a scene during the hearing where basically the opposing lawyer, Jason Clarke's character, is getting him to finally admit, even though she's well aware of the affair, which you see later on in the movie, because we jump back and forth between timelines, as Zach said, and different points in time in his life. But he has to like formally just say the last time he saw Jean Talcott was right before she had killed herself.
Yeah.
And they had sex. He cheated on his wife. But there's a moment where basically then it cuts back to Jason Clarke's character. Then we cut back to Cillian Murphy, and he's fully naked in his chair. And then he's having sex with Jean Talcott in front of Emily Blunt. And to me, it was something that I just thought was unnecessary. I thought it was gratuitous. And I think that the earlier sex scene that comes very early in the movie, I think it's like 30 minutes in, which I think that's getting backlash online. I actually think it's a very essential part, and it's because of a line that she makes him utter, which we see later on in the atomic bomb sequence. But that is a part of the movie that I think I had issue with, just again, close to near perfect. But again, that's a minor gripe. And even in terms of its sound design, there are some interesting choices that I wouldn't fully be behind, but it's not something that would completely take me out of the movie. How I feel like the extent of what the Mattel thing did for me in Barbie, I didn't feel that with it. Maybe took me out of the movie for like 20 seconds, and I was like, oh, this was weird. And it actually, like, kind of in my theater experience anyway, it was like some, I could feel a weird kind
tension.
of I was just like, oh, this is, I don't know if this
you're
needs
like,
to be
what's
in the
going
movie.
on, like, why?
Yeah, exactly. So that was mine. But you want to talk about more of your
I mean,
Florence
I'm a huge Pugh stan, but I just really don't, I didn't really understand why her character was needed in this story. So maybe you guys want to pitch me on why you disagree with me on that. I just think I get what you guys have said about like she was his like connection to the Communist Party, but he had plenty of other connections. Like, why did they I just feel like if they're gonna show her as like a main point, give her character more light to show us like a little bit more into her world.
I'm gonna say I think a big reason was the weight of the suicide on him, the weight of he violated his wife's trust, and also showing that he was corruptible, and then as well as I think it was just important for him to have that in his life, because like he was dealing with so much at that point in time, and then for them to also try and embarrass him in the hearing, and then they're trying to go through, oh yeah, you're just not a good person, like why should we give you this pass, like that was another important thing. And then I think the big part of like the wear it had on his marriage, which was another one of my favorite Emily Blunt scenes, was he hears about the suicide. He's like, I read the note. He's like, he's in the woods, and he's like breaking down. He's like, I feel like, this, I'm responsible. Like I read the note. And then she's like, you better get yourself together, because you don't get to make people feel bad for your sins. And I was like, oh wow, that was a really good point there. So I think that it was another one of his life decisions that he had to live with, because he destroyed his relationships and his reputation, and like he lost a lot throughout the movie. So I think it was really just emphasizing that. And I feel like if it was left out, some people might if they knew Oppenheimer and they knew his story, they might question why that wasn't in if it was going on at the same time as the other stuff. But yeah.
I disagree with your point in saying that you think that there were other people. At least I don't want to just focus heavily on the communist aspect of it because I don't think it's the most central part of the story. It does play a major effect, especially in his hearing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of rebuttal and a lot of brought up points about the communism. They talk about it very heavily in the scene with Kitty.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's an element of Oppenheimer that isn't fully on board with the communistic. I mean, he is on board with the communistic views at that point, but even like you see later on, like his brother marrying that woman,
Yeah.
and she's a heavy communist, and he's like, I don't think that's such a good idea. And I think that her view and her impact on his life skewed a lot of his morality.
Genes.
I do. I think there was a point you made about, do you want to say what?
Yeah, so I think the reason I don't really agree with like the impact of their relationship is because I don't think there was enough screen time of their relationship for us to understand like where it ties in. Because for me, it was kind of like, okay, they met in the beginning, they had like sex together, they started a small relationship, but then it ended up not working out, so it was kind of like the one that got away in a sense. And then we don't hear of her again until way later in the film, where then it's brought up in this like hearing. And so I just kind of wish that they had brought it in a little bit more when he was actually building the atomic bomb, to show that like his full focus isn't actually in this, and he does have a whole secret that he's keeping, because then it would have kept me being like, oh, okay, this means more than just like a one-off relationship.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I do think the relationship is interesting and dynamic in a certain way because you see elements of it. My question
Rebuttal.
to you would be, my question to you would be, if you think the movie already needs 45 minutes cut from it, like I'm okay with adding 15 to 20 minutes to enhance their relationship, but you already think the movie is too long. So where and again, I think you said earlier on, you believe that it would work better as a limited series.
This should have been a TV show.
But again, so to kind of put the Barbie-ism on you, right? Like I said before, that though I don't agree with that sequence, it fits for what they're going for that film, right? This movie works for a lot of people. You want to add to this. So how do you think you would be able to add to it without having to cut? Like, what would you cut from this movie if there are certain people that don't think anything should be cut from this movie?
I would probably cut, I would go two ways. You don't make the atomic bomb like the main focus of this film, and you kind of make it more just like an event that happens in his life, and then you focus more on just the overall arcing story, I think. But if you want to keep the atomic bomb as like one of the climactic moments in the scene, then you don't show all of the back and forth with like his past, and then jumping forward. Like you make it more of a linear script.
Interesting. So you don't think you needed to show like the whole building and the importance and significance of what the atomic bomb was to history and his life and his role in history?
I just felt like there were a lot of scenes at a certain point that it was like all about this, like the building of it and like the science. And I guess just because it kind of goes over my head a little bit, there's some scenes that I was just kind of like, okay, they're building the bomb, I get it.
But don't you think there are certain parts of those sequences where you start to again see the impact that certain people have on his life and the repercussions of certain ways they're acting, and again butting heads? Like we see I think his name is Fuchs, is the character that we eventually see is revealed as like a spy, and he puts him in a leadership position because there's a rift between two other scientists. So, and again, that's one small part.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that's 5 minutes of screen time versus whatever. But I'm saying you don't believe that moments like that are as important, because I think it's hard to.
So I think what I'm trying to say is there was almost like there's just too much information to put this into a 3-hour film. And so like it should have been in a longer form, but then I just think that nobody wants to see a 3-hour film really anymore. I think that 3-hour films, you lose audience members to go see it. And And I think that's why it didn't do as well as Barbie, because I think some people were probably like, oh my God, I want to see Oppenheimer and Barbie. But then they checked and were like, Oppenheimer's 3 hours? Ooh, I don't know if I want to do that.
I think that's a fair point, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. Zach, do you have something? I feel like you had something to say. We're God miking Zach, by the way, at this point in the recording, because we did lose a battery. So
I was just gonna say that, it at least with the draw for audiences, it's definitely based off of the runtime and the subject matter. And
yeah,
I think like when we looked at the box office, Barbie was the easier digestible film that we were talking about.
Yeah, and I do think that, like you were just saying, though, you were like, you would take out some of the aspect of the building of the bomb, but that's so much of what a lot of the people are going for. And maybe we should transition into the atomic bomb sequence,
maybe,
if you want to, because I know that you had some gripes with it, but I feel that that's such. I don't want to say it's the core of the movie, because I've gone on a rant already on here how I think the personal element of the story is what makes the movie so great, but it is essential, in my opinion, to still showcase the building of the bomb. Again, I think you can shed maybe like 5 to 10 minutes from it, but I don't know how you can shed 45 minutes, especially in that sequence, to add on a relationship with Jean, because I do agree that there is room to improve and show the impact of that relationship in a better way, but I think it would be addition by addition, not just addition by subtraction, in my mind.
Yeah, which is why I think I'm sticking with, I think this story is too much for just a film.
Okay.
I do.
I disagree, but that's fair.
So let's get into the atomic bomb sequence, though. Liz, you had a couple opinions about it, but some people had pretty mixed experiences with that sequence.
Yeah.
There's kind of what you were saying, DJ, of just how Nolan challenges and subverts our expectations. That was one moment that stood out to me, that I was like, oh, that was a very different take. And the explosion goes off. Everybody is watching at it, and they kind of all have their own realizations of like how important this event is. And I think that's why they cut the sound from it in the initial reaction, because everyone is just left mesmerized in their own way at this device. And the choice to not have a delayed explosion instead of this grand giant bomb, like, which is like very typical of a war movie or any other explosive in a movie, is like you are immediately expecting those senses to go off, but having that one sense attuned to not being there for a sense left you to think about, oh, why did they do it, or like why are they also transfixed on this device? But so what was your take on that part?
You know what, I think it was one of those things for me that it was so hyped up, the bomb, that I was going in and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the most incredible cinematic moment in history that I will ever see. And it was not that for me. It was kind of just like a great buildup that I was really anticipating. And I was like, oh my gosh, when the countdown was happening and the button was hit by Josh Peck, I was like, this is it.
I had to get a Josh Peck reference.
Of course. I was like, this is it. This is the moment that we've been waiting for. And then the climax just drops, which I do like, because sometimes that does work where you drop to go back up. But I just feel like they dropped a little bit too long in the silence. And like, of course, they want to show the audience like this, in a sense, is beautiful, a bomb, because of all the work and everything that they've put together to create this. But then also it's the beginning of like the worst thing to ever happen. But I just feel like they sat on it a little bit too long, and then my anticipation was done. And so then by the time that the sound wave came, I was just kind of like, okay, what's next? Rather than like, oh my God, that was everything that I had hoped for. Now, I do know, I think like logistically and like scientifically, a bomb, the sound wave does not happen when the initial like explosion happens. So I do know that like he did it technically right. Cinematically, I just feel like the silence lasted a little bit too long.
So I really enjoyed the sequence, and I think a big part of it is because of in the, let's say, I don't know the exact runtime on how much silence there is. Let's say it's 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? About 20 seconds in, 15 seconds in, you hear Oppenheimer's character repeat something to himself. You hear it as an audience member, but he doesn't speak it like on screen.
Which I don't remember him saying this at all. I don't know why.
And I remember it. I'm pretty sure, Zach, we fact checked, right? He does say this.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says a line which is from early on in the film too, where he says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," and it's a scene that, again, my opinion on Gene Talcott's character, for that to be played during that sequence and for him to be saying it in his mind early on in the film, he doesn't understand. And I love that scene, by the way, where they're having sex. She gets off of him and she goes towards his bookshelf and she pulls out this Bhagavad Gita, I think it's called. I just looked it up, so excuse me if I butchered it. But she asks him to read something to her, what it says, and it's that line, but he tries to explain it to her first, like mansplaining, and she's like, no, I want you to read me exactly what it says. So another thing that I just came to with the digesting of the movie, I think is interesting because as he's saying that to himself, I believe that is the moment in time where the switch happens morally. Okay. I think that, again, he's so immersed in trying to create this thing, and there's a pressure, and he wants to do it right, and he doesn't want to, because he appreciates and has a lot of respect for Matt Damon's character, the general. He wants to make sure that he's not like in a shitstorm because of this whole thing, and it all leads up to this moment, and it finally happens, and there is a beauty in it, and you see it visually. But when he says that to himself, he realizes, I am the person that just created something that is potentially destroying the world forever, and the future of what nuclear warfare means to our present and their future. And I thought that was so powerful, and it was such a unique way of, again, for those people that went to the film to see this big sequence, he brought it back to, again, something that was so personal to Oppenheimer and his relationship to Gene, that I really appreciated the atomic bomb sequence, and that was just my take on it.
Yeah, and it was like time stopped in that moment of that deep breath of, okay, this is going to be the world after this moment. Another part of the film is we have been living in definitely our lifetime, but our parents' lifetime too, of this shadow of nuclear war threat, of like the ability that if one superpower wanted to, they could take out another government, or mass destruction around the planet. And when you try and comprehend that there was a time that didn't exist, and they had just created that, and the weight of that on his conscience is everything. That, I think I agree with you, that is the switch in his own persona, where he's like, okay, scientifically this was a 10 out of 10. It couldn't have gone any better, but more like, again, morally, I don't think this is the right thing to do. And I liked there's also a warning before the test happens where they're still constructing the bomb, where Benny Safdie's character talks to him, and he says, we're just here to create the device. It's up to them on how they use it. So he kind of has a pause there, and then he has a double take for a second, and then there's another moment where his group of scientists are congregating, and they're trying to get a petition, and they're like, the Nazis are defeated, the war is at the end, should we still go through with this? And his ego takes over again. He's like, no, we have to keep going with this. And like, yeah, there was funding and stuff into it, but if they really wanted to put their foot down, they could have. And so he was, very gung-ho, like, let's get this done. And then after it happens, and then after it's used, he can't even fathom what he just created until he sees the images too in the slideshow. And I love what they did there. They didn't show the slideshows or the damage of the nuclear bombings, which was another controversial thing for some people. They were like, why weren't the actual World War II bombings shown, and just the test? And I think it was also because he was out of the loop on seeing
On that.
until and they wanted that stuff. But what did you guys think?
I think that's really interesting, and I'm glad you brought that point up too, because again, his character is so egotistical until that moment, and I believe, again, I just saw the film yesterday based on the day we're recording, so my recall, I'm doing my best, but I'm pretty sure that also the first scene we see post testing that is off of Los Alamos's ground is him looking at it. It flashes forward, and it's the Time magazine and him looking at the cover saying the father of the atomic bomb.
I think so.
Which is such a major, beautiful piece of editing and direction, because Nolan is laying out for you that it's the first time that Oppenheimer finally is under the weight of himself.
Yeah.
And he fully feels it.
Yep.
And there's such a gravitas to that in particular that, again, to me, again, I just like, if I'm looking at a film in a 3-act structure, though it does jump around in time, like I think it's laid out in such a way where it's like beginning pre-atomic bomb, middle atomic bomb, and then you still have, like I said, maybe about an hour afterwards where you're dealing with what that not only meant to the world, but the whole trying to bring him down, the opposition of his character and the weight of finally being able to see and admit to himself. And you see it, he's so skinny and he's got the gray hair and you see the pain in his eyes and he's smoking more cigarettes than ever. And his friends are trying to be there for him and support him in the best way that they can in this bullshit hearing that is so not real. I really appreciated the atomic bomb sequence and the way that they put the editing together to show the weight of what that meant to his character on top of what it meant to the world.
I want to talk a little bit about the kind of what you were just talking about with the father of the atomic bomb, Times Magazine. I think one of my favorite things is how he commented on the concept of like working so hard to achieve something, and then when you do achieve it, you actually aren't happy having achieved that. And then they also kind of talk about that with like Albert Einstein's character, where he's like, I don't remember the exact wording, but he says something along the lines of like they're questioning you now and like against you now, but like give it like 40 years or something and they're going to be giving you a medal and like applauding you and like only seeing your achievements. And he's going to be like, and you're just going to shake their hands and like act like it's fine, but like you know that like it wasn't, which I think is such a huge topic in itself to cover, is like again, working so hard to achieve something and achieving success, and then people not being happy for your success in that moment, but then you later on in life having this success come back up, but by that point you're just kind of like over it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that this movie and this story and this person too is the most extreme example of what you just said.
Yeah.
Like to the largest degree, like he created a weapon of mass destruction that is still being talked about, of nuclear warfare forever.
Yeah.
And I do want to touch a little bit because I feel like it is important for us to talk about the relationship he has with Einstein in this movie. Tom Conti plays Albert Einstein. He's a frequent collaborator with Nolan as well. And I love the first time he goes to I think they're at Princeton, but I'm not positive. Where when he first meets Robert Downey Jr.'s character, when he's coming in to try to be a part of,
it's at the atomic summit, like where they do the research and stuff.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So he goes in there, and I love the little like quip he says to Robert Downey Jr.'s character, where he's like, you know, he goes, "You're the man of modern science," and he goes, "And that's the old guy."
Yeah.
Or like he's like, that's the one who used to have it. Now it's all about me. But then you see later on when you see the extent of what that conversation is. And the relationship, I'm glad like he's in the movie a couple different times to show the relationship that they had. There was such a eternal respect there. And after the fact, I've been seeing a lot on social media and online that they did have such a very close-knit relationship, Einstein and Oppenheimer. So that was something that, again, and for it to be something that was not shown in the trailer, like I think the only shot they show in the trailer is just like the shot of like the hat flying Einstein's head. But there's such an emotional core to what that relationship means and what it means to science, which is again boils down to what this all has to do with, right? He's a physicist, and again, it takes you to the beginning where he's at university, and the end where it's the old and the new, and it's just amazing. I really appreciated that aspect of it.
I did too.
But
I loved it.
Should we give scores, or is there
Should
anything
we
else we want to talk
rate?
about?
Yeah, we'll do some scores.
All right.
Should we do? Oh, you want me to start?
Yeah, you can
Go
start.
ahead, take
you
it
could start.
away.
You could
Take
start,
it
God
away.
Mike.
Okay, the God Mike. I'll give it a 10 out of 10. I saw this. I'm gonna brag. I saw this in 70 millimeter,
Whoop,
and it was
Yeah.
the clearest. I wish I could see every. I've been saying this to everyone. I wish I could see every single movie this way because it was the clear. I could see Robert Downey Jr.'s pores, and I never knew I needed that until that moment. And I just saw it like it was the best quality possible. If anyone has a chance to do it, totally recommend it. But it was the most. I can't remember the last movie experience I had where I walked out and I was pondering life questions along with the ethereal experience that I just got from a movie and the way that it was masterfully done. And I think like especially going into it, is this going to be one of Nolan's great movies? And I think personally that this was like his opus, like his Irishman in a way for Scorsese. I think he could do a bigger movie than this, but for 3 hours biopic, having all this packed into it, being so personal, I think it was his opus of his work. So yeah, what do you think, DJ?
I would tend to agree with everything you said. We talked for a long time about this film, and I went on for a long time. This movie affected me in ways that I feel like, one, a lot of Nolan's movies have not in the past, though I do appreciate a lot of what he does. Like a film like Dunkirk, I really like, but it's a movie, and he's admitted this too. He's like, it was just like kind of, it was experimental. Like Zach just kind of pointed at, this is such a personal story to him, and I don't think it was personal until he picked up that book and he really interpreted this in such a way where this guy was so much more than the guy that created this massive bomb. I would also give it a 10 out of 10. I think with my minor gripes, though they are gripes, they're so minor that it doesn't take away from the movie as a whole for me. And it's not my only 10 out of 10 for the year so far. I think this is a really good year for movies personally so far.
Oh, absolutely.
Great year.
And this is towards the top of the list for me, but again, and in terms of Oscar nominations, I think we're going to see a lot for this. I think we're going to see a lot for this and Barbie.
100%.
But I think that this is definitely going to be, Nolan has 5 Oscar nominations to his mantle. I don't know what his films total have, but I think this is definitely going to be his most rewarded and accomplished film in terms of award accreditation. So, Liz, let's get your take.
It's I as much as I like had tweaks about this movie and like pushed on concepts, I do think it's an incredible film. It's very entertaining. I didn't feel bored at any times. It's just there was a lot of information, but I am going to give it a 9.
That's fair. I mean, that's fair. I'll take it.
It is a great film.
I will definitely take it.
I just don't think it's perfect.
That's fair too.
And those are the flaws that I've found with it.
Okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed our very long discussion
Very
here
long.
on both Barbie and Oppenheimer, or Barbenheimer. Again, 2 unbelievable movies. Please rush to the cinemas if you haven't already. If you watched this whole entire thing and didn't see these movies,
Wow.
kudos to you, but you just got spoiled.
Or it
heavy.
might be my mom. No, she did see Barbie. She liked it.
Okay, awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. But anyway, so thank you guys so much for watching. We have a lot of other stuff to come for you guys. Make sure, again, you follow our social medias at CinemaWave Media, at _CultureWave Media, and be sure to share, like, subscribe. And thank you guys all so much. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I am Liz